You know what I mean? Like, what a great, just as Mordheim and what we're doing here with the Age of Sigmar Mordheim edition or Mordheim Age of Sigmar edition. I don't really know.
Mordheim Age of the Damned.
Yeah, exactly. Sure, that'll work. Just like that. I also want to say up front to our viewers, I did have Q&A on here, so you can do that, or you can leave comments, I think still. I don't really know, but I turned that on, so there it is. I figured since we're going to do this informally, at least for the first episode, I'll turn this on so that people could ask questions, so it can be interactive and whatnot. So hopefully that'll happen. There we go. All right. So Tom, let's why don't we start at the very beginning, right? What are we doing here? Why have we
with the show or with the
project?
The project.
If somebody's here, well, why are they here?
They probably are either interested in, most likely they're interested in Mordheim. Less likely is they're interested in Age of Sigmar, a comp pack.
Okay, got it. So you feel like this works in both directions?
I think so. I mean, like, on one hand, like, it really creates a campaign system for playing Age of Sigmar, which is something that we've seen in a couple different comp packs, but not in any, like, seriously progressive way, which is what the Mordheim rules have done here. So I would say that for those that are coming from Age of Sigmar and wanting something, it gives composition rules and it gives progression rules for kind of campaign play. And a fairly large number of, like, what we call scenarios, or what Age of Sigmar calls battle plans.
So let's take a step back and let's talk about the total project. Okay, so who, what, when, where, why? All right, let's answer some basic questions. So what? Okay, so Age of Sigmar, whatever you think of it as a rule set, I offer the following supposition. If Age of Sigmar had been released as a spiritual successor to Mordheim, as a skirmish-style small game about taking warbands and having very specific connected chain, Sigmar was released as. Not only do I think people would have, I think at worst people would have been meh, right? And I think most people would have been perfectly accepting of that and happy to see a game like Mordheim or their favorite type of thing get attention and get an update. That's my honest to goodness belief. I think that any vitriol that's out there against the system is largely based on the fact that its existence killed Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and it is a much different animal than that.
Yep.
I do not think it's a much different animal than Mordheim, right? I mean,
Agreed. I mean, I think that the Age of Sigmar rules, so to say, play best at Mordheim scale.
Right.
When you have 10 to 20 miniatures on the table. I mean, that's just in general. Now, granted, in Age of Sigmar, that is often like monsters or monsters cav or the equivalents. But that said, I think that scale, it handles that scale very well.
Right. So that's sort of the first thing of why we wanted to do, or why use Age of Sigmar, because I think as a Mordheim game, it's completely non-controversial and a great system for it. What you want, I think, in a narrative type of skirmish game is something, or what I want at least, is a fast, fun, efficient system that's very brutal and has a lot of this, sort of like unexpected randomness and interconnectivity, and so that's what we wanted to deliver. So the other half of that question is why Mordheim? Who gives a crap about a specialist game that was made 15 years ago and discontinued 12, right? So why do we care? We've talked about this kind of at length, Tom, but I mean, why do you care about Mordheim? Why do you still like it and think it deserves to get updated in some new type of treatment?
Sure. Well, what I would say is this. Age of Sigmar or not, this is a project that's kind of been on Vince and I's heart for a while. And I mean, our plan was to rewrite Mordheim with 8th edition rules, or 9th, when we found out 9th was coming, 9th edition rules already, or what we thought was 9th. And so it just so happens that with Age of Sigmar coming out, it ends up dovetailing fairly nicely into this project that we had kind of already had on the docket. That said, why Mordheim? Not to be too promotional of your channel, but as you mentioned in a previous video, it's kind of the best accidental game ever created. And it's there's just something special about Mordheim. I don't care, like, I'll sit down and play it, roll up a warband and go to town, and not care about the clunky 5th edition, like rules that I'm running in of Warhammer, and I'll just deal with it because the game was just that enjoyable and that good and that engaging. And so I think it deserves that kind of update.
Yeah, exactly. And this is nothing against the original Mordheim. We're not doing this because we think the original Mordheim is crap or something like that. To be very clear, I've played that game a absolute metric shite ton over the years, and I think it's absolutely a great game. I think it has some issues, but every game does. I've never seen a perfect game system. We talked about those kind of ad nauseum in the Mordheim Pain episode. But I think the reason I wanted to update it is because there was always we have all these new war scrolls. The game seems like it wants to play well at this scale. So this is a chance to both sort of answer some major concerns with Age of Sigmar and simultaneously bring one of my favorite games up into the new age and do some fun stuff with it and really just kind of, give it a second life, I hope. Not that I guess it needed it, but give it a dual personality. I don't know, whatever you want to say. Another way to experience the game. There you go. So just as sort of Mordheim itself lets you experience the world of Warhammer and Warhammer Fantasy Battles in a different way, I'm hopeful that what we release this week, this Mordheim AoS, will let you experience AoS in a new way. So, and that would be the next thing. So yes, what are we releasing? All right. So what we are going to put out this week, and I'm saying this publicly so that way I have to do it, because that's going to force me to stop painting because I can't help myself, and I have a problem, and do the formatting. So Tom and I have finished all the principal writing, and I need to get everything that we have all collected into the right sort of format to release. What will be released to everybody out there is an alpha set of rules. I want to be very clear about this. This has not been edited. This is raw design. Okay? Like we haven't, so you're going to find grammatical errors and spelling errors and all that stuff. And I don't expect any of you out there to fix that. That's not why we're releasing it.
When he says it is raw design, what that means is that development processes haven't actually been levied against it. So normally what we would do is we would have a small concentrated group of kind of testers, alpha testers, that would go play the game, give feedback, and then we would begin to massage the rules and stuff like that. And so what you guys are getting is those in the community that are participating in this kind of initial test are getting the alpha. You're participating in that first round of feedback before we go back into primary development.
Right. And that's exactly what we want. Like I'm not looking for the community to edit this for me and find spelling mistakes and grammar errors and garbage like that. What I'm looking for is feedback on the game, obviously. Play it, have fun with it, find out what doesn't work. And because the reality is that any group that I sit down with and instruct them how to play it, I'm going to imprint my biases on. And, I think that Tom and I have a lot of experience doing this, and we're going to certainly do a full development rotation on it as it goes forward. But there's two things I'm really looking for when we put this out there is one, what doesn't work, right? And two, what else would you want to see, right? So if there are other things that you want to see on a go forward, I am super inclined to know what those are. By the way, for everybody watching, the Q&A app is on. I don't know where that is on your screen, somewhere around here, but somewhere I think you can ask a question. So if anybody has a question, you can comment as normal on the video or put it in the QA thing. And I can't explain to you how to do that because I don't know, but I assume you just type it over here somewhere, one of these sides. Anyway, so that's what we're going to put out. And to get a little deeper on that, Tom, do we kind of want to talk about what's going to be in this initial thing? Do you want to kind of break it up and talk about what we've got here?
Did we decide? It's a great time to be asking this. Did we decide if we're releasing 1 or 2 PDFs?
It'll be 2 PDFs, just for simplicity's sake.
Okay. So there will be 2 PDFs. The first one will be the core set of the rules that will cover everything from a very brief snippet of lore as to how and the context of how and where this game is taking place. And we have shared this previously, but I'll just, do you want me to go into that content now?
Drop it, man.
Yeah. So the basic conceit of the setting is that when the old world was destroyed and consumed by the warp, the areas of the world that had high concentrations of warpstone or solidified chaos were not in fact destroyed, but rather remained in partial, fragmented, or even in whole land masses, somewhere lost between the warp and the mortal realms, or deep in the warp, such that it's not easily accessible. And Mordheim was one of these places, as is Lustria for that matter. And so, when an entire moon lands on a landmass full of warpstone, that kind of increases the concentration of warpstone there.
You're welcome, lizards. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you're not gonna be happy about what the landscape looks like. But anyways, where are we going with this? So the idea is that that this area is somewhere kind of gated in the realms, such that you can get to it, but access is very restricted. And one of the fascinating things about this is that because of the timelessness of the warp, you can literally have people coming into Mordheim from literally various points in history. So maybe what has happened is that some people are coming in from the Age of Sigmar, from the events that are happening in the Age of Sigmar. Maybe a band of Stormcast Eternals have stepped through a portal and somehow accidentally ended up in Mordheim. Maybe some people are clinging to the edges of the Mordheim region, like rats, clinging onto a last vestiges of a sinking ship. So they're coming in from the actual end of time, the end of the destruction of the old world. And so they are refugees from that region, and a myriad of different possibilities with that. But the idea is that this is a restricted region, and that it's also one of the last sources of the remains of the old world. And so beyond the actual value that the Mordheim has for Weirdstone, in whatever market that exists in the Age of Sigmar, more significantly are the relics and the history and the echoes of the time when the gods, that is Sigmar and Teclis and Tyrion and Malarian and all them, walked the earth. There are remnants of that time here. There are history books there. So there are things that are valuable in the city beyond the standard treasure searching. And so this is, I think that it creates a very narrative-rich environment for us.
Right. It's also a weird place that has portals that can access out to everything else, but it's hard to get in and out of regularly. So it does have tactical value as well for all people who would want to take it as a pseudo end around like the all points in the story or something like that, right? So there's lots. Yeah, that's the basic story. Solidified warp, Mordheim itself, big floating city. And the other fun part about this is because the warpstone only anchors it but doesn't completely protect it from the void or the chaos that surrounds it, the city itself likes to shift and change and move. So it's kind of, we can play like with those, the fact that you've got a weird different board every time and new buildings pop up and disappear, that's actually part of the narrative conceit, because the city's kind of being warped and changed by the chaos that's around it, right? So it's all kind of part of the story, why your Mordheim boards never look the same, and the city is somehow so massive that it can never be fully explored and mapped out so easily and all that. So so that's going to be in there, that nice little description that we probably went way too deep on, but that's okay.
Way too
Tom's
deep.
never met an elevator pitch in his life. That's all right.
It's true. I like talking. That's the problem.
All right. So what else is going to be in this thing besides a fun story?
We will have in the primary PDF, we will have basically the book broken into phases of the game. And so you will have kind of the Warband creation, I think, is going to be the separate PDF. But you'll have like the pre-game stuff, the actual playing of the game with your Warbands, and then the post-game. So the scenarios will be probably the first chapter, where it'll talk about putting together choosing your scenario and whatnot. Playing the game will be the next section, which will be basically the Age of Sigmar rules expanded on, to adapt for new so we added basically one new phase, which is the recovery phase, which happens before the hero phase. And we added, and then we tweaked the battle shock phase to reflect more of the traditional morale checking stuff of prior Mordheim. But otherwise, the game largely plays like Age of Sigmar. And then we'll have a post combat phase, which will involve exploration with all of the charts that one would expect of such a, it would be recovery, so injury, activity, what troops do you lose, what permanent injuries are suffered, and then exploration, and then recruitment. So that's the main PDF. And then the second PDF will be the Warband construction rules, which will involve. Actually, I'm totally wrong on this. The first PDF will have a
Don't
Warband.
get too deep into it. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Which is so it's going to deal with all of the base information for all the units, the recruiting values, and all those things for each of the armies or each of the forces, so to say. It'll have errata for the individual unit. So we've broken it up by race. So there will be like a high elf section, for example, that will have the primary chart for all the forces of the high elves. It'll have the errata for the troops that needed to be abilities and things that needed to be adjusted. And it'll have a section on mounts. It'll have a section on the spell lore for high elves, which is high magic, or high magic. Surprise, surprise. And it will have and then in a separate PDF, so that's in the main book, and then in the separate PDF, it'll be all of the different warbands divided up by armies. And so we have 3 or 4 high elf warbands will be in there. And so at the end of the day, we ended with, I believe, 55 warbands for the main book.
Yeah. So let's talk for a minute about what that kind of looks like. We're going to go deeper into like what's the same. So some people out there may have played Mordheim before. Some people out there may have not, but we're going to kind of get into what's same, what's different. So we'll go through some comparisons and kind of prep up and that kind of thing. But let's talk for a minute about how we constructed the warbands. So anybody who played Mordheim before may be familiar that the base book had a small number of warbands: witch hunters, various human mercenaries, Reichlanders, Midheimers, and so on and so forth. And then, your cult of the possessed and whatnot. And so what we went for here is taking all the existing races, using that as the first step of the hierarchy, but then breaking it down. The warbands are smaller narrative groupings underneath that. So the easiest example I'll give you, quick and dirty. Everybody who knows my love for these little guys right here. That's the Skaven, right? And so Skaven are the easiest thing to picture how they break up, right? So you've got a Clan Eshin warband, you have a Clan Skyr warband, you have a Clan Pestilence warband. You get the idea. So whatever narrative constructs exist within the army are then used to break up and create these individual warbands. Okay, and you can grow and expand them beyond their initial limits. You can recruit other things outside of your normal warband and such like that. But putting it together, that's what you're looking at, and that's the 55 warbands. Now, what you'll notice is not there, at least in this initial thing, is things like the witch hunters or the sisters or these original older warbands. We chose not to update those just for this. I have no problem with them eventually showing up, but one of the things that I wanted to do was allow everybody to use the armies they've got, the war scrolls that already exist, because that's the other point I want to impress here, is that we wanted to keep this so that everybody already basically has the rules to play it. You don't need to learn all new rules for your troops. So the war scrolls you use for this are the war scrolls from Age of Sigmar. And when Tom mentioned the errata, we changed as absolutely little as possible, because it sucks to have to have a war scroll printed out and need to reference something else to figure out what it actually does. That is terrible. So knowing that, we erred on the side of let wackiness in. Okay. Yep. It was only when something just flat out didn't work in the alternate rules that we cut it and reformatted it.
The hallmark that there's errata on a troop will be this: you will read an ability and go, huh?
Right.
On the war scroll, how does that work in Mordheim? Because I don't have a unit of troops. How does that work in Mordheim? Because I don't have, you get the idea.
Yeah. If you read the text on the war scroll and it legitimately makes no sense within the context of the Mordheim game, then we probably eroded it. If it's just something that would be pretty powerful when put on Mordheim, hey, okay, cool, that's in. If it was something that got weaker because of Mordheim, so sad for that model, right? Like that's the way them cookies are be crumbling. So that's kind of what that is. Tom, do we want to use that to segue into kind of setting some expectations? What's going to be the same? What's going to be different?
Yes. And as we transition into this, what's the same? What's the difference? I want to try to like put a point on something we've been talking around, and that is in the design of this game, in the design of whatever this is, this rules pack, whatever you want to call it. We wanted this to be 100% Mordheim and 100% Age of Sigmar.
Right.
Okay. And so this is not Sigmar with a couple like Age of Sigmar with a couple rules tacked on. This is not Mordheim with Age of Sigmar shoved into it. I mean, the goal with this was actually to have people from both communities 100% recognize the game they're playing.
Yep, absolutely. And that can be a tricky thing to navigate, but ultimately, I think it was not as bad as it could have been because we weren't trying to shove together like peanut butter and glass, right? Like these aren't two things that just don't belong together. There really is an alignment there. All right, so let's talk about some samies first. So what are the things that people may know? Give me let's bullet point a couple out, Tom.
Yeah,
give me some things.
Warbands that advance and get better or worse as they go through scenarios and move through the narrative. Yeah, that's still there. Permanent injuries, gaining experience, exploring Mordheim, gaining skills, stat increases, building warbands over time. Distinction between heroes and henchmen, although the henchmen we call troops in the document. They're basically identical to what henchmen were. Large number of scenarios, varying win conditions. All of these things are the same.
Yep, exactly. And I think when I look at a lot of those, they are really a lot of those are what I would say are the meat and potatoes, right, of Mordheim. Like if those things weren't true, I wouldn't feel like I was playing Mordheim when I look at it. There was one thing you didn't mention that I want to really put a strong point on, and that's the existence and power of randomness. Okay.
Yep.
Mordheim was a brutal game, and it was a very swingy game, and I really do believe that was what made it good. I've said this so many times now, but games with low levels of randomness with flat experiences are boring and don't have long playability. Games where you can suddenly snatch victory from the jaws of defeat and vice versa. Games where you can lose the entire engagement, but then through a random post-battle thing, have a big win and vice versa, mean that you always want to try to do better. You're always pushed for the next experience. So that is certainly preserved. You can be riding on a cloud one moment when you attack, this something that has a lot of wounds and you crit it and you crush it and it drops dead. And then the next moment, the same thing can happen to you. Yep. So, things like critical hits, the injury chart, all that kind of garbage. And I don't mean garbage in a bad way. I just mean like all that stuff is still there.
As is like the in combat, like out of action chart.
Yeah.
Which means that like the gap between, like normal troops and heroes and like monsters is actually not as big as you'd think, because wounds are wounds until you get to going from 1 wound to 0 wounds. And then suddenly like you could have a henchman that is going from 1 wound to 0 wounds stick, after taking, 15 additional wounds.
Right. Sure.
He's not, by random statistics, you can have one of those stick just like you could in original Mordheim. And suddenly those high wound other models don't, it's not as significant.
Yeah, and that leads us to one of the big differences, and we might bounce back and forth between here a couple of times. People familiar with the original Mordheim will know that your selection of people, or the people that came into the city, was rather limited. You basically had, a fairly weak general sort of thing, a commander. Even your other heroes were pretty much a bunch of nubs. and your henchmen were usually just whatever your core troop was in your army or something like that, right? What we're going for here, since we're importing the actual war scrolls from the game, is two things. Your most of your heroes will still look like the old heroes. That is to say, they're not going to be truly impressive heroes on the scale of Age of Sigmar, because it's the unit champion of each of his groups that becomes sort of the hero. So you've got this. Go ahead.
So an example of this, just to drill in concrete. I know why I know high elves, which is why I always use that example. The White Lion champion is called a White Lion Guardian on the War Scroll. Okay, so the White Lion Guardian is a hero that you can get in your initial Warband building situation, and he brings White Lions with him,
Right.
which is what Vince was kind of talking about. And so he is a lower level hero. Now you will still probably have a 5 wound like full hero as per the like High Elf Prince, for example. Or an Anointed of Asuran or whatnot. But those will often be the general.
Yes. In most cases, though not all, because you can also have wizards bouncing around, but in most cases, your big multi-wound people will be your general. The other big difference is that we're opening the gates a little wider here. In old Mordheim, kind of the biggest thing you could have running around was an ogre or a rat ogre or something like that. Which is fine, and on those rules, that was probably about the best you could do. They also were pretty garbage in the original rules. I would also point that out. I don't ever take if you ever play old Mordheim, don't ever take the rat ogre. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. Admiral Mahdi warned you. But in this, we wanted to open the doors up a little bit. So more or less, everything is allowed in. That is to say, within the narrative construct of your warband, if you legitimately, so I'll stick with Skaven since I know that one. If you're playing Clan Molder, well, Hell Pit is probably a thing you can bring into your warband. So people do have access to big, crazy monsters. And, they are very frightening. I'm not going to lie. They are absolute beasts. Now there are trade-off costs for them. You pay in warband construction in the nature of opportunity cost. They are also very risky propositions because when they
get put out
of action or flee, and they can flee, monsters are not unbreakable to the bottom of their wounds chart. They have a point where they themselves start sort of checking to run away when they get beat up real bad. So they can actually leave much earlier than you would expect. And whenever that happens and they get off the board, whether dead or from running away, you could lose them very easily. So they are very much sort of glass cannons, and there's a nice balance to them. There's some other fun balance points that people will figure out once they get into the game. I won't spoil it too much, except to say that when monsters fight in buildings, fun things happen. So
monsters were not meant to go in buildings.
Yeah, they don't go in there very well. So interesting things will come up there. So there are a lot of natural counters to them, despite the fact that they're absolute wrecking balls. And you can go buy war machines, or some armies start, or some warbands, start with war machines and stuff like that. So you do have your tools that you're normally used to, just in a much smaller number. And our goal here was to make everything have value. So a big monster has a value in being a wrecking ball, but lots of troops have value in being able to spread out and take objectives because, again, this is a highly scenario-based game with extremely weird and differing scenarios. So we've got 12 scenarios here we'll put out with the alpha pack. Certainly we've got a couple more schemed up and that, may come out. And if anybody out there in the community ends up designing some as part of this, hey, I would love to see them. But we tried to keep them all varied with interesting conditions and all that sort of thing. And so all of the members of your warband, no matter what their type, have strengths and weaknesses. They're good in some situations, not in others. And that's what we wanted to absolutely speak to. Everything has a real choice to it. There aren't really many automatic wins where you're like, yes, this is a thing that I should absolutely take, because if I don't, I'm dumb. Everything has value in some cases. Starlight Nightflame said monsters are not meant to go in buildings. They're meant to climb them, if we remember Rampage. I do. I have it on, like, I have, you can't, obviously you can't see it because you can't see through my wall right there. There's an arcade machine over there, and yes, there's Rampage on it. And yes, that's much like what the monsters in there did. That's what would happen here. So you are very close to the mark. That's pretty accurate. So I think it's fun. I always lamented not being able to bring my big toys in. We wanted you to be able to use any of your toys, but still have there be balance. And so a big portion of this alpha is going to be, on paper, we think this all works. But, you know, I mean, to be very clear, we haven't really played it either. Like, we gave our best guess here, and we're bringing you in at the earliest possible moment. You're going to be participating in the development with us in the most real sense possible. And so we absolutely want, need, value your feedback. Okay.
That said, if you're playing and a monster wrecks a game, okay,
right.
Make sure that you play a couple matches,
right?
Because it does matter, like, what scenario you were playing. It does matter, you know, like, in wrong circumstances, in certain circumstances, monsters are going to be wrecking balls. But there are counters to them, and there are, you know, yeah. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're playing a scenario where you've got sort of 3 buildings scattered around the board that have multiple numbers of objectives in them that you need to get at and get off the board, right? So that sort of thing exists. So that means that the warband that has more smaller, faster troops is going to win that scenario, most likely, right? I mean, like, not automatically, but that's who stands the advantage, I should say, right? So a monster isn't very helpful there. He's not helping you get at those objectives, and he's certainly not helping you recover them. Whereas the person who's got a lot of real quick little infantry that runs in, grabs it, runs the hell out or something, and just uses some screening force with some of their other infantry, that's a big advantage for them. So the point being, take into consideration the conditions you're in, right? Because, like I said, things have different strengths and weaknesses, and that's what's meant to happen. Obviously it's just sort of core rules. So one of the differences is just sort of emergent of the fact that we are using, like, the AoS war scrolls, the AoS rules. So you will see stuff like, you know, it's exactly what you expect off the war scrolls, because it is the war scrolls. Whatever your white lion says on that war scroll, he moves this far, he has this many wounds, he has this many attacks, this to hit, this to wound, this rend, this damage. Yep. That's what that dude is. And he's a little white lion running around with his axe ready to chop people for Ulthuan.
And, like, what I would say is that, like, there will be equipment customization from the outset, as there is in Age of Sigmar. So if there are weapon decisions to be made in general, all of those options are still there in general. Musicians, and there are some things that have been removed that aren't going to be in the game in the same form. Musicians, like those that are carrying icons or idols or things like that, in general, are not there. But we tried to preserve the game as much as we possibly could with what made sense for Mordheim.
Yeah. So that's kind of what's different than Mordheim. And honestly, just for a quick minute to tangent, one of the fun things about a very simple game like Age of Sigmar, and this is true across in many different types of games. Again, I don't step away from the Warhammer Fantasy replacement and take this thing in the void. A simple game is easy to just bolt on additional rules packs to, right? Because there's not a lot of tangled up web of complex rules that when you start pulling on one, everything else gets pulled apart. We didn't need to really change any of the core conceits and rules of Age of Sigmar because it's so slim. There wasn't that much to mess with. So we could just set ours down on top of it and roll. So to go back to the same for a minute, you'll see rules for climbing, hiding, falling, right? Things that aren't present in Age of Sigmar that were certainly present in Mordheim. And all we had to do is just rest those on top of the existing movement rules, right? They didn't conflict with anything. There was no, we just said, hey, here's this bolt on. Now this stuff is true, right? You want to climb, you do it like this. If you fall, this happens. You need to knock down a building, this is what happens, right? And so all of that is very easy to just bring in. What does weather look like? What does nighttime look like? All these kind of things are there in the rules, right?
Yeah. Do we want to take to walk through Warband construction? Maybe you pull up a Warband scroll and walk through what building a force looks like?
Yes, in a minute. Not quite yet. Because I want to talk about differences from Age of Sigmar.
Okay.
So, like, we covered the differences from Mordheim, which I really think are fairly minimal. But differences from Age of Sigmar. You mentioned a couple, like the absence of like icon bearers and musicians and crap like that. We just kind of shuffled all that to the side because it doesn't make as much sense when you have basically individual troops running around as opposed to units. In the same way, there are two small changes to commanders and wizards in that your commanders do not have whatever their command ability says in their war scroll, they don't have. So because those command abilities that are one of those things that just don't make sense when you put this on a skirmish platform. A lot of them just don't work. They flat out don't make any sense. They're meant to be, the command abilities that are in Age of Sigmar are meant to be buffing an army, right? Big blocks of, or big numbers of troops. I don't want to say blocks, so I'll get people angry. But big groups of troops. So what we wanted to do is...
can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
It would also create winners and losers. And what I mean by that is this. There would always be some heroes that are the best for this type of game based on those capabilities. And we wanted to move away from that. We didn't want something like that to be determinative for an entire race.
Yep, exactly. By the way, so I know the Q&A thing isn't working for some reason. I don't know. I'll look into it. But either way, if you do have any questions, just leave a comment. I can see them. I have it up on another screen, so I'm like watching. So if there's any comments or questions, drop them in. I'll answer them. All right. So yes, you don't have your stock command ability printed on your war scroll for exactly that. Tom, that's a great call. And so what we have instead is a nice list of very flavorful, randomly assigned command abilities. Now, there are a few generals who sort of have an ability to kind of always pick a particular one, but they are very rare. The standard case is your command ability is a randomly generated thing. And this gets right back at the randomness, because now it's not like, hey, Elf Noble always has this. No, Elf Noble could have 17, 20 different abilities, right? So no two people's Elf Nobles look exactly alike necessarily. In the same way, magic spells, the wizards who are here, who are breaking in here, magic is much more unreliable given where this is all taking place. So magic is more unreliable. And how we did that is not by screwing with casting values or something like that. We just said every wizard is basically randomly generating their spell, and we went back to racial spell lists. So all of the warbands, or whatever you want to say, races, I guess, that sort of thing, have their own unique spell lists from whence the wizard randomly generates his spell.
Now, a couple addendums to that. Yes. Each wizard in general will start with one of the two core spells of your choice and one randomly generated one. So we cut the difference between Mordheim and Age of Sigmar in that, like, you don't have the two autos plus one determined. You have one of those two autos you get to pick. So if you want to be more offensive or more defensive, you have that option. And you'll have a randomly determined spell from their lore. And most of the time, what we did was we went across all of the spells in a race and created a lore out of those spells that are pre-existent. So we wrote very, very few actual spells. In general, everything that we took was a currently existing spell from that race's spell list. And then for command abilities, everybody will get by default the Inspiring Presence, which makes one of your models, instead of a unit, makes one of your models immune to battle shock tests, and we can talk about what that looks like in a couple minutes. But and then you will also have a command ability that is randomly generated, and that will say something about who that general is, because all of the command abilities they are very specific to speak to a general, whether it's his leadership type. So right now we have it on a D66 scale. So if you are familiar with it at all, you determine one of your six-sided dice as a tens, one of them as a ones. You roll it, and then. But what that means is that it's actually broken down into 6 different charts, and those charts you will be able to determine randomly across all 66, or you can choose like savagery or brutality or whatever one of your leadership styles, or inspiration or courage. And those 6 charts are actually broken out according to different like kind of archetypical leadership styles. And so each of the abilities on that list is mapped to that. So if you want to narrow the randomness, that is another option.
Well, as we all know, fear will keep the outlying systems in line. You know, fear of this battle station. So, yeah, that's exactly. And little spoiler for those Bretonians out there who are ready to ride into the city of the damned. We dug all the way back to good old 5th edition Bretonia book, which had Bretonia's own unique spell lore in it. Oh, I flipped exactly to the page. Bam! Magic. And so those of you who may go all the way back to here with Bretonia may recognize some of that magic that they have available. So there we go. A lot of fun stuff there. All right. So do we want to get into? Let's go ahead and get into some Warband construction. Do you have one up and you want to share your screen?
Hooves of Doom. To answer your question, you asked if there will be themes such as Khorne, Slaanesh, but not crazy warbands like the Possessed or Carnival. The answer is, for right now, yes. For right now, there is the Blood Tide of Khorne. There is the roiling pestilence or whatever of the of
Nurgle.
Or so we went with those. Where is it? The roiling plague. Yes. So those themes. There is also a Chaos Undivided list that is as well. So like we tried to again, we didn't create new units right yet. We wanted to stick with what is currently in the game.
Yes, I certainly love all those old warbands and would love to see them come in as this progresses along, right? So it's not we're definitely not saying, oh, I never want to see the Carnival of Chaos or a group of witch hunters or something like that. No, hell yes, I want to see those eventually. I just wanted to stick to the war scrolls that everybody had that we know exist and people are roughly familiar with them to start with, because it just gave everybody sort of even footing. That's it.
Do you want to do which one do you want to do? Do you want to do
I'm glad that makes sense. Good. And so by all means, by the way, as we go through this, if somebody wants to reach out to me as we go through this and they say, hey, I really love this old warband, can I take a crack at it? Sure. Like that's gonna probably be my response. So I'm all about community involvement. Now as to what warband, I don't know, pick something fun and interesting. There you go. So I'll set the bar completely vague like that, Tom. Not a high elf thing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, by the way, I totally lost. Oh, I lied to you guys. We have 51 warbands, not 55.
Oh, goodness. Well, now we got to design more, Tom. Great. Thanks. That's fine. I'm sure there'll be 55 by the time the game actually goes like full live or whatever.
Likely.
Reaches version 1.0. We'll call this alpha version 0.5. All right, let's see what you picked. Let me go over to your screen here. Oh, you had to pick a super controversial one. Okay, good. I'm glad you picked this one. All right, take us through it, Tom.
So this is the one of the Dark Elf warbands, which was the Exiles of Clarkarond. If you guys know anything about the Dark Elf lore, Clarkarond is the coastal city, but it is also where all of the animals are trained for the Beastmasters. And so this was a nice kind of narrative dovetail that we brought together of exiles from this city that are a composition of both largely like 2 factions within the Dark Elf warbands, which are the Beastmasters and the pirates.
The sailors, yes.
And with that, I felt like this actually demonstrated a number of aspects of warband selection. So we'll just go through this process. So up this upper box that you guys see here, do you actually see my arrow pointer or not?
Yeah, we can see your pointer.
Okay. This box will actually have a brief narrative description of the warband. We have not done that yet. We have a chart over here on the side, and this kind of walks you through what warband creation is going to look like. And generally what this looks like is you're going to choose a warband leader, and you will choose 4 heroes from the hero list. Heroes will often generate troops, and so we'll walk through that process. Sometimes you can choose something from an alternative selection that will not, either a hero or an alternative selection that will not generate troops. So we will go through that now. Okay, So the selecting warband leader for this warband, they have the option of either choosing the Beastmaster on a Mana Core or the Black Arc Fleet Master.
Yeah, this is a particularly dangerous one because their warband leader is a monster, right?
Yep.
So this guy is for realsies.
And that's not real common.
Right.
You know, there are a handful of warbands that do that. This is one of them that is an exception. And some would ask, like, why would you choose the Black Arc Fleet Master over the Beastmaster on the Mana Core? Well, one, he can't get off the Mana Core, so there are implicit restrictions and benefits of having a monster, and we'll get to that. And there are other reasons, but there are reasons. We'll move on. So on the selecting heroes, you're going to choose up to 4 heroes from the following list, which is you can choose the Beastmaster if you've not chosen him as your general, or the Black Arc Fleet Master if you have not chosen. So you can have one of total of these per warband. The high and then the other hero options are the High Beastmaster Scourge Runner Chariot, the Cold One Dread Knight, the Black Arc Reaver, Dread Spear Lordling, or the Dark Shard Guardmaster. These are champions for these Dark Elf, what are traditionally been Dark Elf units. And anything that's in red is going to generate additional troops. Anything that's in black is not going to generate additional troops. So, for example, and then in addition to that, instead of one of these options up here that are heroes, you can choose additional other things in place of in those hero slots. So, for example, if you had already chosen a Black Arc Fleet Master, you could actually add a Charybdis to your warband in place of one of your heroes. Now, what you end up giving up by that is you end up giving up the hero and all the troops that it would generate. Now, having heroes is going to be significant for the exploration phase of the game. And so you're going to want heroes, and so you're making a very real sacrifice by giving up one of your hero slots to gain one of these benefits below. And the same thing for the War Hydra that requires the Beastmaster. The 3 Harpy, or you could pick 3 Harpies, or you could pick a Cold One Chariot, but you have to have the Cold One Dread Knight. And so let's say, hypothetically, you have chosen to have a Beastmaster on Mana Core as your warband leader, and you've chosen to do a Scourge Runner Chariot, a Cold One Dread Knight, and a Black Arc Reaver. So basically, you have done. Then we got one more, right?
Yep.
And then let's say you want, since you took the Beastmaster Mana Core, you want the War Hydra. Sure. Let's do that. So now when you move into the recruiting troops phase, you gain a certain number of troops based on what you've selected. So we selected the Beastmaster Scourge Runner Chariot, that he brings 0 Scourge Runner Chariots with him. And you ask, why did we include that if he's not actually bringing troops? Well, it's going to matter later during the recruitment phase, because when you recruit things, it's actually easier to recruit the things that you have heroes for. So that's why he is tied to that Scourge Runner Chariot unit. And then we also chose a Cold One Dread Knight, so he's going to bring 2 Cold One Knights with him. We chose the Black Arc Reaver, which is going to bring 4 Black Arc Corsairs.
Real quick, Tom, I have a little bit of feedback from Starlight, who pointed out rightly, and I love that I've read over this 100 times and didn't see it. It's Black Arc with a K.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. And that's why we warned you that we will not have all of the editing done.
Right. No, good catch. Okay, please continue.
Yes. So we have so let's see what the size of your warband looks like right now, okay? So we have your general, we have 3 heroes and a monster. So that's 4 troops total. And then the Scourge Runner brought 0. The Cold One Knight brought 2 additional Cold One Knights, and the Black Arc Corsairs brought 4. So you're gaining 6 down here. So you have a total warband size of 11. And this final stage is actually going to be amended because there's more that goes on in the stage than just warband size. You also calculate your number of heroes and things. All of the main statistics that you need for your warband. And so your warband size is actually the number of troops you generate in this phase plus 2, and that becomes your warband size maximum initially. And then as your general levels up, he will, or certain abilities are gained, it'll increase your maximum warband size. But the significance of that is what number of troops you start at or models you start at the very beginning sets your warband size, and that's very important because that will limit how much you can grow and how quickly you can grow.
Right.
And so choosing a monster may be good initially, but you're actually giving up potentially between up to 5 additional warband slot or 4 additional warband slots because of what troops you've chosen.
Yep.
So there's a long game. There's an opportunity cost between the long game and the short game. And so anyway, so that's kind of the general picture. And then warband bonuses. They, as a warband, gain the ability called Save Them for the Pens. The exiles from this warband often grab fallen enemies as slaves for their war camps or food for their fell beasts. Enemies put out of action by infantry of this warband have an increased chance of being captured. Henchmen who are put out of action while under the influence of this ability are permanently killed on a 1-3 instead of a 1-2. And heroes who are slain on the serious injury table are instead captured by your warband. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to get at the flavor of who this warband is beyond what the individual war scrolls are represented, and that's what this ability is meant to do.
Yeah, and let me just talk about warband bonuses for another moment. So the other thing that we're aiming at here with these warband bonuses is these exiles are a pretty potent warband, because your hero, you have a remarkably good access to monsters. So Tom happened to pick one of the most monster-heavy warbands, which is fine. Like, that should show you this is about the upper level of monstrous sort of warbands. And so as a result, when you look at what warband bonuses they have, it's actually fairly minimal, right? Like, that Save Them for the Pins is fun and neat and flavorful, but it's not really moving the overall power of your warband up. And so that was part of how we tried to use the warband bonuses, was to make sure that if the warband has a lot of power up here, then it doesn't have a lot of power down here, and vice versa, right? That the warband bonuses spoke to sort of how much default capability you had from the troops that you could select. An easy counterpoint to them would be something like the Clan Eschen of Skaven, wherein you have about 3 troops you could select, that are just like, it's just a bunch of little ninja rats, and that's all it is, and they got to do all the work. So, those little ninjas are dangerous, and their warband rules make them into little ninja assassins. Yeah, there you go. So, like, when you look at what they can do, they're getting a lot of, actual, like, meaty bonuses that are going to make them, even though they're just a bunch of little rats, much more dangerous on the table. That sneaky being especially dangerous.
Do you want to walk through the Clan Eschen now?
Sure, I'll take it through real quick. So obviously you've got your Skaven Assassin, which is actually a character, so he's got a 5 wound model. You can choose up to 4 heroes. You can see what they are, but Night Runners and Gutter Runners. You can the only big potent choice is you can take a Vermin Lord Deceiver, which is the big crazy rat demon. And but he takes up 2 hero slots because he's just an utter beast, because he's a hero and a wizard and a monster and all of those things. So he's chewing a lot of space. And then, your troops you get are just some Night Runners and Gutter Runners. But, assuming you don't make this choice for this giant monster, what you've got is a lot of dudes running around throwing ninja stars. When you compare that to the previous warband, where you're like, oh boy, what do these guys do against a Manicore and a War Hydra and that kind of crap, right? Hey, there you go. Hey, somebody asked a question. Okay, so it works. William Page, you made it work. Yay! Questions work for somebody. I don't know how, but there you go. So, yes. So, William Page said, I thoroughly hope there is a cult of Cain. Well... anyways, to continue on Clan Eschen, yes, sneaky gives them the kind of way to, to be very scary when it comes to these objectives, even if they don't have the same killing power. Tom, are you scanning to where I would like you to scan to?
That's what I'm working on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm jumping back. I decided that scrolling is not the best.
You're not good at navigating this document.
Nope. Wow. Nope, not at all. There you go.
Okay. So yes, we like, correct me if I'm wrong, but we do have the a murder cult in here. Yes. And
I was going to jump to it real quick and show and flash it at William Page, but
yes.
Let's continue with Clan Action.
That's fine. Short answer to your question. Well, I was done with them. But short answer to your question, William, is hell yeah, there's a cult of murder in here. Come on, buddy. You know how much I'm a fan of those witch elves and those crazy girls running around stabbing people. So yes, and that's exactly what we wanted to kind of capture, right? So it's those little narrative groupings within the army that makes sense to be together and have not just like, hey, these are troops that work well together. That's not what we were thinking about. We were thinking like, what is the in-world reason for these people to be hanging out together? And like the Clark Aland is if I pronounced that correctly or whatever, is a good example. It's rooted directly in the narrative. Same thing with Clan Eshin, and you'll see it again and again throughout all of this. So, and like we said, there's 51 of these. We did do Chaos Dwarves. We did do Stormcast. So everything is kind of in here. And certainly we'll probably have some more. All right. Anything else we want to talk about with warbands, Tom? Oh, I know what we can talk about with it. That's right. There was one more thing I wanted to cover. You're on mute, by the way. So I don't know if you were talking. But there was one other thing I wanted to cover real quick. People might ask, so why not use money for recruitment? Because old Mordheim, you had money to recruit. So, hey, there you go, the Cult of Blood. Excellent. So why not use money to recruit? That's a good question. And the answer of why not use money to recruit is twofold. One, I think that I wanted to stay in line with sort of the principles of Age of Sigmar of not having hard points on things for your selection. Because I always felt that produced winners and losers. And in the end, I think that it's unnecessary because opportunity cost, the rest of the engine of the game says this thing is good in A, this thing is good in B, make a choice. Mm-hmm. And as long as opportunity cost is strong enough to govern it, we don't need gold coins or anything to determine it. Now, on a go forward, we have money, and you get money from completing your engagements, and you go out and you can buy equipment, you can use it to recruit more troops, because then it's used not as like a points mechanism to balance, but it's sort of a reward mechanism to build and to show your success game to game and track your advancement in the narrative. So money is just a second advancement track along with experience. So long story short, I felt it didn't have enough value to be utilized for creation, but had immense value as you progress through the game. So don't worry, you're still going to be finding gold coins in ruined hovels and other things like that as we go through and progress through the game. So Hooves asked a question, which was, what is the maximum warband size? That's a great question, and the answer is, I'll stay on Tom actually. And the answer is that your maximum warband, there is sort of a theoretical maximum. I forget, we calced it out one time, but the game itself we don't need a second arbitrary one because the game itself self-governs. And the way it does that is your maximum warband size for your warband is your number of troops you initially recruit off of this page plus 2.
Yeah. So off the top of my head, the warband with the highest potential starting warband size is the Warlord clan Skaven, who literally stocks up on Paul Leader slaves, and so all slaves and champions of slaves, which is going to start with a warband size of like
29, 31 max, right?
Yes, 29, 31 max. Yep.
Right. I don't know how valuable those 31 guys are.
Yeah, well, hitting on 6s, looting on 6s. Yeah.
But I think that's probably the legitimate maximum in the game, but that's sort of an organic maximum, right?
Yep.
What will realistically happen is your warband is limited by your initial recruitment plus 2, and that's lock. Once you recruit, that's locked for life. It only grows when your general grows in experience. So we're using the same experience chart out of Mordheim, didn't change that. So if you think about that, it had the little boxes. It's the same boxes that if you know from Mordheim, you know how them boxes look. We're using the same boxing. The difference is we just drew 2 lines. So if you think about it, the old Mordheim chart had 90 boxes of experience, and it had this sort of geometric algorithm of when you gained skill ups. So what we did is, so it was 30 per row. We just drew 2 lines through there. So every 10, you effectively gain a level. Your hero gains a level, and that level lets him increase his maximum warband size by 1. Only those he gains increase his warband size. Every heroes will start with experience, again, just like Mordheim. And just like in Mordheim, you get no credit for where you already start. So starting with a really high number of experience can often be detrimental to your gaining additional bonuses. And by the way, those big monsters like that Black Art guy on Manticore starts with just bucket loads of experience because he's a monster.
40, or hold on just a minute. I think it's 41 to be exact.
Yes. Oh, excellent. William Page, let me say this real quick. William Page said, if you're interested in asking questions when watching live, when you load the page, in the lower left of the video is an annotation you can click that says be part of the conversation. So there you go. Cool. Thank you, William. Perfect. And if you're watching this not live, that means nothing to you. But that's okay. Go ahead, Tom.
Are you guys still looking at the warband list?
Yes, we're still locked on you and you're still shared.
Okay. So let me swap real quick and just show you guys something else. Okay. So here's a very large chart.
Oh, yeah. You know what people love, Tom? Spreadsheets, right? I mean, can't get enough of them.
Clearly. But I want to show you guys an example of this. So here's the Dark Elf. Here's the Dark Elf list. And so we're talking about Beastmaster on Manticore starts at 41 experience over against the Black Arc Fleet Master that starts at 20 experience. And so there's going to be probably 4 or 5 level ups between the Beastmaster. So like this would be one example of why you might want to start with a Fleet Master as your general rather than the Beastmaster on the Manticore. So those types of things. We've also added, just briefly, I want to make a note because I noticed it here. We've added keywords. We've kept a lot of the current keywords, but we've added a couple of keywords that can trigger in various ways, including troop types, which are going to be significant for triggering certain things in throughout Mordheim. So,
yep, infantry and things like that. So just it was sort of necessary to have that again. So we just kind of bolted them on, and you can see in the table there where if it's the ones that weren't italicized are from the War Scroll, the ones that are, are new. Pretty straightforward. So the goal here is when you go out, you got your warband, you set your initial size, whatever the case, and then you engage in these scenarios. Like I said, we're gonna have 12. They're pretty varied in what you're trying to do. Some of them are based off of old scenarios that you may know and love from the old game. And some of them have some fun new twists and different scenarios that we created. We tried to play with... Oh, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to ask a brief question as a teaser. So, Vince, out of the scenarios that we've created, what's your favorite one so far?
Don't Wake Daddy. There's not even a question. Don't Wake Daddy is my favorite scenario. Don't Wake Daddy is a scenario wherein somewhere on the board there is a big sleeping giant or other similar monster, and you have to go in and steal his treasure without waking him up. And you and all of the other warbands are simultaneously trying to do this, but of course, it presents all sorts of fun bluff situations where, like, you can wake him up intentionally. So, like, if somebody else is going to get to the treasure, you can just say, screw it, and wake up the giant and get him rampaging out after the people who are stealing his gubbins. And then there's a giant on the loose, and nobody likes that. So just, I love that scenario. I think it's a lot of fun, and it lets you play with weird... I like any scenario where it's like, where you can say, screw it, if I can't win, we're all going down, because the giant can win that scenario. Like, the victory condition is such that the giant can be the winner. Like, not even a player could win. And I love that idea.
No one wins.
Yeah, exactly. Well, somebody won. The giant won. He's happy about that. He gets to keep his treasure. Okay, so Dylan Pond asked a question. He said he's very excited. Cool. We're good. We are very excited too. And are you planning to update it as new things are released? Yes, but with the caveat of like, we're working on a lot of things, and I can't promise that like I'm gonna necessarily put in everything. When it makes sense to would be the answer. But out there in the community, if there's something that has been released that you don't feel is represented, and you've got a good idea for a warband, then let's do that. Let's get that happening, right? Like, it doesn't have to be only us writing this stuff. And my hope is that certainly eventually I can sort of let this birdie free into the world and kind of take very little, uncage it and take very little control of it once it's sort of formalized and the community's happy with it and it's in a solid state. And then from there, it just evolves naturally.
What I would say is that Dylan, in addition to just to build on that, one of the things that we did intentionally with design is to make it so that when things are added, it's not a hindrance, even if you have an existing warband. And so what I mean by that is this. Recruitment, starting a warband initially is a very set endeavor. You have and we haven't talked about what recruitment looks like yet. I'm assuming we will get there. But you will be able to grow beyond the current bounds of your warband. And add things that are not currently there. And so just because you don't start with something doesn't mean you can't get something. And that includes both things within your own race and even your wider faction, and even at times beyond your faction. And so we have worked in a system to accommodate that. It's a lot more difficult. It's going to be a lot more expensive to add things beyond the normal bounds of your warband, but it's possible. And so that means that as new troops are released, even if a default entry gets made for that new model on a race's chart or a faction's chart, just because it's not in a warband doesn't mean that it can't be added at any point in time during the gameplay, assuming obviously everybody that's playing in your Mordheim league or whatever agrees to it.
Right. So the goal would be to update the master chart so those new things can be recruited even if they don't have a warband where they have a home in to start with them. Yeah, great answer. Okay. Very good. So let me jump over to another question that came up, which was from Skeleton Flower, who said, will there be cool and unique skill tables for the different warbands races? Who wants cool and unique stuff, man? That's terrible. No, of course not. I mean, wait, no, absolutely the opposite of that. Yes, 100% we will have cool and unique skill tables. Absolutely. So what we have right now is a set of what's going to be here in the alpha is a set of cool skills that are sort of roughly generic across the warbands, right? And as we go forward with it, there will be if you look, like, you'll see in the rules that there's a space not filled out yet because we didn't consider it minimum viable product for alpha release. There's this special rare equipment and special skills sections or whatever, special rules for the races and for the warbands, and that's where that stuff will go. So you'll have cool and unique skills, but they're generic across the game to start with, and then eventually you'll see, by the time we release, you'll see those filled in.
Yeah, and cool and unique gear.
Yeah.
Which is not currently on those charts. We did get to racial mounts and racial siege.
Right. So you've got your mounts, you've got your siege. There is a generic gear table right now, but again, given the expectations of where we are with alpha, we wanted to keep it a little tighter to begin with, knowing that we will have the opportunity and certainly the intention to grow this over time. My hope would be in the long run, we can certainly bring Master of the Black Arts or whatever it was, that cheaty Skaven paw fighting skill that just made you a straight murderer. You could just like fist punch, just 1-inch punch every other person in the game dead immediately, with your like Bruce Lee warband of Skaven, back with their cheaty skills. And we can bring in back the dwarf unkillable parry skill too. Just why not? All the garbage that was there that made the game just ridiculous. Sure. Okay, so do we want to talk about we talked a little about post game. So obviously, just at a high level, you finish up an engagement, there's maybe a winner, as I pointed out. There's probably losers. That would seem to be necessary. And the first thing you're going to do is go to your injury chart. Won't get too deep into that if you ever played Mordheim before. Yep, it looks like that. Here's one big difference. So if you think of the old chart, it was D66. And it had just sort of a grab bag of injuries. There was also full recovery, of course. And some of these were actually positive. Like there was a like 24. If you rolled 24 and then 4 through 6, that was a mystical time because suddenly you went frenzied. And you had 6th edition frenzy where your attacks were doubled. Which was, oh boy, molto bene. So so certainly the goal was to have some things that are just positive on that injury table, some things that are both positive and negative, but could have fun upsides. So here you think of like Sold to the Pits, where you had to fight the pit fighter, and if you won, you got a bunch of money and experience and that kind of thing. We certainly wanted to preserve all that. Have bad, neutral, good and bad, which is different than neutral, right? And good.
A couple good.
A couple good, yeah. Not a lot. But to have that, but to have the full range of potential experiences available. The other thing that I did is, or that we did, is
you wrote this chapter.
I did. Well, I did write that, but still, this is all us. I mean, I showed it to you and said, "What do we need to change?" So it's not like you just sat around and were like, "Well, whatever." I mean, no, I just was split out the injury chart into 2 charts of mental injuries and physical injuries. So being put out of action, even if you are physically fine, you could still find that you have some very serious mental repercussions to your near-death experience. I really wanted to hone in on the horror and the fear, and not all crippling scars are physical in the city of the damned. In a city trapped on the edge of chaos, boy, it's, not everybody wears their wounds on the outside. So you can end up being on either one of those tables or both. So that's very exciting. And there we go. So fun mental and physical trauma that your character can suffer over time.
Yay.
Yes, which also then broadens out the sheer number of injuries you can suffer, hence varying the number of potential experiences. Then next you're gonna roll on your exploration. We changed this around some in that your hero's existence is what allows you to roll on the exploration chart, not their survival of the battle. One of the things I mentioned in the pain episode was that I always hated that your ability to roll on the exploration chart was contingent upon your heroes not being put out of action. The problem with that is the downside incentive. That incentivizes me to not use my heroes, right? Because I risk them. And that means that in the long run, I risk starting the death spiral.
And it incentivizes you to not play the game.
Correct. Your hero should be in there bashing face. And because they should be the ones levering the fight. And that was just a bad incentive. It also gave pick certain winners and losers with warbands where, like, if you were a warband where all your heroes could attack at range, you were just better. Period. Because your heroes would advance faster with no risk or very little risk, right? Because you just send out a wave of henchmen, your heroes would be pegging people from a distance, gaining enough experience. Couple of henchmen go down, you voluntarily rout if people get close to your henchmen and call it a day. You risk nothing, you get maximum experience or maximum exploration roll. Woohoo! I know that people will say, yeah, but just play the game right. Well, that's fine. I certainly agree with that. That's a fair point. But why not have the game rules create the incentives to make you play the game in the fun way, right?
Right.
Like, there's no reason to make these things work counter to each other.
Sure. Like, just because something is designed badly doesn't mean that we just need to play with the bad design. Right. But I would say more than that. I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I'll pick it up. So anyways, all your heroes will get a roll. You'll get fun exploration. It looks like it used to. That is to say, you're rolling for both a high number, which gets you more weird stone shards, and doubles, triples, quadruples, quintuples, sextuples, which then get you onto progressively better and better lucky find sort of charts.
And
go ahead.
We've added a new measurement in this. So not only are you looking at the total, not only are you looking at the doubles, triples, and whatnot, we've added a new factor to this, is that you're looking for all the total number of dice above 4. So a 4+, which will tell you how many heroes you can send out during the exploration phase to search for items.
Yep. So then that also governs how many heroes go out every round looking for stuff. And you can then, that's the next phase, which is you go and recruit. And all this basically works the same. Everything works like rarity. So if you remember Mordheim, things have rarity.
Well,
that's how difficult they are to find. Go ahead.
It does work a little bit differently.
Sure. No, I understand. I'm just saying, like, the base concept of rarity is the same. That's what I was pointing at.
Yeah.
What's different is that certain things have what we call stake costs. And so to even attempt to go search for them, you pay an upfront cost, a stake cost. Okay? That's how much it costs you to go even try to get that thing. And you pay that amount regardless of the success or failure of the roll. Okay.
So there are 3 things that you can go out and look for. You can go out and look. You can go out and look for additional recruits. You can go out and look for gear, or you can go out and look for mounts. Okay, and by gear I mean both like in individual equipment and also siege, and then mounts. Now, for going out and searching for regular troops, that like both troops and mounts have stake costs. The searching for items does not.
Right.
You want to keep going?
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about troops, right? So troops have a rarity level kind of based on what they are. It's a fairly standard thing across the board. And troops have a certain sort of stake cost. There's just a flat cost to go and attempt to recruit people. You then make a rarity roll. Now, here's the trick with this rarity roll for troops, is we didn't really want to screw you and just have you burn your money. But that doesn't mean you always get what you want either. When you make your rarity roll for troops, you may recruit anything that rarity or less, right? So the point being is that you can hope to roll well enough to recruit that warrior priest, but you might not get it. You might only be able to get the halberdier. That's fine. You can then, as normal, progress through, pay the rest of the cost if there even is any. The stake cost is assumed to be part of the total cost of recruitment. So like the second column is just what else you have to pay. Effectively, your stake cost is kind of subsumed into the total, as it were. And so as a result, some troops recruit for free, like the very basic troops. So if you think of like a Skaven slave, you pay your stake cost to recruit him. He has no additional cost. If you find him, he's free because, he's a Skaven slave. I would assume you just kind of punch him in the face and tell him, hey, you're with us now. And he's, okay. And that's it. I think that's pretty much how that goes. More elite people are still going to require a little bit of the cash to join up beyond what the stake was to find him. And then I was just going to say, and obviously there are exploration things that play with this. Access to portals and things like that will play with this ability to recruit. Again, we always wanted to tie everything back to this narrative construct of what's going on, right? So the reason there is this rarity and it's hard to recruit troops is because you're in a weird pocket dimension only accessed by randomly shifting portals in like a Dark City-esque sort of nightmare wherein you don't always have easy access to get back to your time or the mortal realms or anywhere else. Right. So that's what rarity is representing here.
Yeah, and it takes time and money in order for you to get what you want. And time is money. So that's what the stake cost is representing. Now, there are going to be certain benefits for certain troops. So, for example, if you have the hero, let me start again. When each hero can be sent out to either gather other troops, to look for a mount, or to look for rare items. And so when a troop is sent out, a hero is sent out, you decide which one of these you want to do. And if it's to go back to our White Lion example, if I send out my White Lion Guardian and I just want another White Lion, as my White Lion Guardian, I can choose to what's considered automatically succeed at that roll. You don't roll the dice at all, and you're treated as if you automatically succeed at finding that base troop. Okay, So
just to let me connect something back up real quick, Tom.
Yeah.
If we remember back to our initial discussion about opportunity cost in Warband creation, here it is again, right? By taking that monster or that other thing that might even take something like harpies, which can fly, and obviously like flying troops in a scenario-based Mordheim-like game are very powerful because they can just ignore terrain and get up there, get to the high levels of buildings very quickly. So it's a super powerful thing. But by taking something like that, you also are now here limiting yourself, because you're gonna, if you want to get that troop and you don't have that hero, you're making that rare roll, right? Every time. There's no auto recruitment for you because you chose to have that other versatility instead of the hero who can go find more of his own kind. The Dread Spear can find Dread Spears. The Chaos Warrior can find Chaos Warriors. These all have names, but you know what I mean. So please continue.
And it also incentivizes multiple heroes at the same type. So for example, like you look and be like, well, why do I want 2 white line heroes? Well, you want 2 white line heroes if you want to be able to auto recruit 2 white lines per scenario. And so that like those create those incentives.
Why would you ever need to recruit multiple white lions, Tom? My warband size is capped at my max troops +2. How would I ever need that many?
Because you're going to be dying. Like troops are dying. That is going to happen.
That's right, because death is a thing in the City of the Damned.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one catch with this, the one other exception is that generals are the only hero that can actually recruit other heroes. And so when you send out your general, he's the only one that actually has a chance of pulling in another hero. And so heroes are, you can get heroes through other events and things like that in the actual scenario. But in general, they are going to be a little bit harder to come by. And you're going to want to have your maximum number of heroes, 6, so that you can maximize your exploration rolls, maximize your recruitment rolls, and maximize all those other things. And so by choosing that monster in the beginning, you are hindering your ability to actually make money and to advance.
Yep. And that's part of what we wanted to aim at. It's always so. I'm kind of echoing with you. Oh, there, good stuff. Okay, cool. So in many of our RPG designs, just to kind of talk about broad philosophy for a second, there's a concept that I have of what I call 45-degree design. Okay, so and in general, what that means is if you think of an x-axis and a y-axis, right? So a vertical design encourages you to just do this one thing all the time, and the horizontal design says spread out and do the most things all the time, right? What we're always aiming at is to be in the middle. It's to design at a 45-degree angle, meaning that there's equal tug in both directions to both do more of the same and spread out and do different things, because both have benefits and costs, and sort of you tilt your way along where you feel the most comfortable. Okay, so that's just sort of my personal game design philosophy. So that we covered kind of recruiting troops. Why don't we talk for a minute about just like mounts and gear?
Yeah, so certain heroes will have mounts that they can actually ride. And mounts, they have special rules for entering the buildings and the like as well. So when a hero gains the cavalry keyword, or if a troop has a cavalry keyword, there will be consequences of that, or the monster keyword for that matter, depending on what or the chariot, because there are some heroes that ride chariots. And so these different mounts are all things that are achievable. There are some mounts that are actually selectable from Warband creation. So you may have the option, for example, of choosing, instead of a hero, you can have a dragon mount, for example, maybe for your Dreadlord. Those types of things. Actually, I don't know if we did that or not, but yeah.
That's probably a bad example.
Yeah,
but those examples exist, sure.
Yes. And so there are reasons and so mounts will be keyworded to actual troops, to actual heroes. And so when you send out a hero to look for a mount, you're sending out the hero that will be riding that mount. So if you want your Dreadlord on a cold one, I know that exists. You send out that in a normal recruiting, you pay the stake cost, you roll, and you can recruit any mount that that hero can ride at that rarity or less. And so if you want a mount, in general, you're going to spend money. You're going to spend money trying to get mounts, because those DCs range anything from rarities, I think 6 or 7, all the way up to 10 for monsters. And so you're going to be putting out a lot of money. And then once you actually roll that, almost all of them have an additional recruitment fee as well. And monsters, it is a steep fee. Or you alternatively, you could just do it in Warband creation, but you're going to pay costs for that, in Warband creation, in an incentive, as Vince has said.
Yeah, as a side note, it's funny how some rules just work differently. I think one of the things will be fun to have people experience is the way certain rules work differently in a game without units, because in Age of Sigmar, Mordheim, whatever we're calling this, Mordheim edition, there's no units. It's like traditional Mordheim. You got a bunch of guys running around. It's just models.
Models
right?
that you target.
Yep. And so things like Dragon Breath, which are can do just unbelievable number of mortal wounds to a unit, are perhaps less valuable when targeting a single Empire halberdier. But man, does it suck to be that halberdier. Like, don't be the one guy standing in the way of Dragon Breath. Whoa, boy. Oh, there is nothing left of Jimmy. But at the same time, that breath is still making the same injury rolls, so he could just, I don't know, get lucky and be behind a rock and only be knocked down. So, that whole, like, there's as we talked about earlier, those gates make these kinds of things a lot more swingy and variable and fun experiences. When your Empire swordsman gets breathed on and takes 6 mortal wounds, but then the guy rolls all 1s and 2s and he's only knocked down, and then it's his turn and he stands up and gets the hell out of there. So yeah, good times. So then equipment.
So and so on mounts, let me just say this: you'll have the option of, if you get your mount, you will have the option of, when you set up at the beginning of a scenario, deciding whether you are on your mount or not. And so you will have the option of bringing your mount to a match or not. And there are incentives why you will not want to bring mounts on occasion, whether those are environmental circumstances, whether those are the actual goals with the scenario. You may look at that and go, it's not worth me bringing my mount, because you can lose your mount as well. If you are put out of action or you flee with your mount, there is a chance that your mount does not come back.
Yeah, horsies, they sometimes don't always make it. There you go. As anybody who watched early seasons of Game of Thrones knows, sometimes when the horse meets the mountain wins. So, yeah, pretty brutal. All right, anyway, so then recruiting or going out for gear. So this is a more traditional experience. You want to talk about that quickly?
Yeah. So what you're going to do is, when you go out to look for gear, you're going to be gated by how many 4+s you roll, because those 4+s represent the opportunities that you have to go out and to interact with merchants, or to go out and do the things that you would need to do to get those rare items, or to find it, to go through the portals, or whatever those circumstances are. So let's say on 66 you roll on 6 dice, you roll 3 of them as 4+, which would be your average. 3 of your heroes can go out and search for gear. That hero names a piece of gear that they want to search for. So let's say they want to go out and get a rope and grappling hook. Then they do not pay a stake fee, because you don't pay for items that you don't actually purchase. And so you go out because you may not find it. And so you roll. Then once you've declared what you're looking for, you roll the rarity dice, and if you roll that rarity or higher, you can pay the cost to purchase that item. As we have it right now, unlike mounts, items can be traded amongst various models, but that could be subject to change depending on, some items may have restrictions, and we'll see. The other thing is that siege war machines is what we've called them. Not because there are some war machines that are not siege, particularly war machines that come that don't scale with the number of attendees. So siege war machines are any of the war machines that exist in the game that, in general, they had an effectiveness based on how many models they had adjacent to them. So, for example, I'll go to the High Elves. The Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower is it has 2 attendees to it for its effectiveness. And so what we wanted Siege to do is, Siege will operate, you'll purchase Siege as a warband by sending out guys, and they will be able to operate. So you can choose to deploy a siege weapon at the beginning of a game like you would a mount, and it does not inherently have any crew. And so it is actually crewed by however many models that you choose to have crewing it within 1 inch of it. And so this creates a natural kind of interesting thing where you can have people crewing the war machine, but if they do, they're not using range attacks and they're not moving and charging, because if they do that, then they're going to get pulled away from the war machine. And so you can bring a war machine, but you have to dedicate people to crewing it. Yeah, and so basically any of the models, any of the war scrolls that have those types of like scaling crew war machines have fallen into this category.
Yep. And so to go back again to the opportunity cost thing, right? So smaller war bands that picked more specialized types of, smaller numbers of troops are going to be much more hard pressed to crew, to war machines that require 4 crew or something, all the way up to their maximum number, right? Because you just don't have enough people standing around. Whereas the warband that's got bodies can more easily then counter the monsters. And if you think about that, that's an exact trade-off, right? The person who has a lower number probably picked monsters or big things. The person who picked higher numbers can go crew their war machines, traditional counter, bang, bang, boom, rock, scissors, whatever, that thing. So again, I hate to keep banging that drum, but I just want to point that that's why we made these decisions, and sort of designed these things the way we did. Everything in here was thought about a lot. Like, we didn't do anything off the cuff. So that is to say, we try to think deeply about all these impacts. That doesn't mean we got it right. I'm sure we got plenty of stuff wrong. I just want to impress that there was always thought behind it. So we had some kind of idea.
And the consequence of some of the war machines are going to be interesting beyond the mechanics of it, just because suddenly the Doom Diver becomes an effective way to navigate the board, assuming you survive the fall.
Absolutely. You got to get up to the top of a building fast. Look, I've seen the beginning of the first Warhammer Online trailer, and that orc was trying to get in that city. He missed. He didn't survive. But the point was, they threw him at that wall. I mean, that's what was going on.
And you can do that too with your orc and goblin warband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think what else was there? Anything else on the agenda that we didn't cover there, Tom?
What we haven't actually went through is the changes of the combat phase. We kind of skipped over that. Do you think it would be valuable to walk through kind of the addition to the recovery phase and the change to the battle shock phase?
Well, I kind of mentioned the change to the battle shock phase. I think the recovery and that kind of stuff, people can read it and they'll get the idea of it. I think it's going to be hard to just sort of internalize it. But the concept of the battle shock thing is very interesting. It's very easy to lock your head around.
Yeah, do you want me to run through that real quick?
Yes, please.
Okay, so basically what we did with the battle shock phase is we wanted to represent the shifting tides of the battle as morale waxed and waned. And so we battle shock tests are taken at the end of the round based on 2 factors, and it's whether for non-heroes have one, non-heroes have one, non-hero, non-monsters have one kind of circumstance that they make battle shocks, and then heroes or monsters have another circumstance where they have to begin making battle shock tests. These are individual battle shock tests, not battle shock tests for the entire warband, which that has its own. So for the entire warband, I'll just say that now. These you have to make during the recovery phase. You have to make your route test as normal, which is basically a warband battle shock test. So this is the kind of the one-off phase check at the beginning of if you've lost a quarter or more of your troops are out of action, you have to make route checks, which are basically battle shocks for the entire warband from your general. But in the battle shock phase, sorry about that tangent. In the battle shock phase, your standard troops, so your non-hero, non-monsters, will have to make a battle shock test if they're in close combat with 2 or more opponents and there's no friendly model within 6 inches. And then a knockdown, stunned, and fleeing allies do not count as friendly models within 6 inches. Most of you guys will recognize this simply as the all alone test in the previous in Mordheim, and basically that's what it is. But that's representing that morale for troops, and most of those troops are only going to have one wound, and so that fits their kind of morale for what's going to cause them to break individually. For heroes and monsters, if that model has lost at least half their total wounds, they begin making individual battle shock tests to rout or to flee. And everybody right now, we have it as everybody in the battle shock phase is making those tests. So you can very quickly see kind of the consequence of this.
Yeah. And just to put a pin on that, that's another governor to these larger monsters and bigger heroes and things like that, right? Is that you don't have to kill them to beat them. They can get to the point where they go to half wounds and run because they don't want to die. And, that obviously, especially in the case of monsters, them running off the board is a potentially extremely costly proposition, because those things can be very expensive to get back once they've scampered off into the ever-shifting chaos of the City of the Damned, ne'er to be found again.
Yeah. Not just get back, like, from a rarity standpoint, like, actually, like, from a raw troop standpoint, they also cost exorbitant amounts of money.
Right. Yep. So I think that we wanted to do that because, again, it should feel like both games. So we wanted to preserve the concept of Battle Shock, and we wanted to absolutely represent that Mordheim is a very scary place, and so having those all alone tests for your common trooper people, and having even the heroes here and monsters can get gripped by fear when they start getting their teeth kicked in, and so that's how that's being captured and represented, and obviously still having your whole Warband runs away thing. Obviously still a very important thing.
And your commander can still make, like his default inspiring presence can make a model immune to battle shock.
Right.
So suddenly your hero seeing their Phoenix beginning, your anointed of turn and seeing their Phoenix getting his teeth kicked in, he may want to begin to dedicate his attention to studying that Phoenix to make sure it doesn't flee.
Right.
Because that could be a very costly endeavor. And with a movement of 14, that they're going to remove themselves from the battlefield very quickly.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Okay, so was there anything else we wanted to hit on? Anything else that you could think of that you wanted to touch on?
Not that I can think of. I think that really covers the wide gamut of stuff, of where we're at, what we've designed, the new stuff, recruiting. Let me just, as we kind of begin to wrap things up, moving forward, we'll probably. Do you want to talk about the show?
Yeah, sure. So I called this like Town Crier, the Mordheim AoS project, episode 1, because Tom and I hope to regularly do this as a touch point. We'll try to get the whole Q&A and all that working better and all of that, and try to evolve this because I want this to be community interactive. And I'd like to have people, if people do have ideas and feedback, I'm certainly not opposed to having you come on and talk with us about your experiences when you play tested it, what you saw, all that. So we absolutely want this to become a community involvement thing, and look to all of you out there to join us with it, both like here watching and actually on the show too, talking with us and answering questions and so on and so forth. And so we're going to try to do this regularly. We haven't really settled on a schedule yet, as there are obviously we have other shows that we're trying to bounce around with and figure out what's appropriate. But I would like to make sure that we do this at least bi-weekly, so that we have, a fairly regular touch point with the community and with all of you out there as you begin grabbing a hold of these rules and play testing them and start sharing your feedback. So, and we'll have a formalized way to collect that and that sort of thing. Yeah, I think that's pretty much. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah. I mean, we'll generally cover kind of the current updates as to where we're at and where we're going design-wise. We'll talk about activity in the community on those shows. So we'll talk about certain podcasts to check out, or certain channels to check out, whether they be on terrain or Mordheim or just a variety of topics. We'll generally do a dive into either design or rules or particular racial and all the warbands associated with that or whatnot. We'll move through that with each show, doing kind of a different deep dive, and then we'll generally end the shows with a Q&A time.
Yep. So there you go. That's kind of the plan on a go forward. I hope everybody's excited. I know we are. We will have the rules available this week. I can't tell you exactly what day. As soon as I finish formatting everything and you know, basically we have a lot of different sort of documents, and we need to pull everything together into one unified document, or 2 unified PDFs, as it were, and we will make them all available through a generic source like Dropbox or something like that, something everybody can access. And go ahead, Tom.
Ultimately, our goal at the end of this is to have a single PDF, basically, or some type of document where that has cohesively kind of brought this stuff together, and we hope to have support a thriving community.
Yep. And also, like Tom and I eventually have sort of plans. I'm not going to make promises, but we have ideas and plans of having like some pictures and stuff in there and things like that, you know, as we go through this. Just to level set expectations right now, what you're going to get, like the Warband doc, Tom made look very pretty, and he did a lot of good work on that. What I will be putting together will be a very basic document. So it's not going to look sexy or exciting in its first little alpha version. I apologize for that. We do plan to, as Justin Timberlake instructed us, bring sexy back as time goes on. If anyone out there has any art you want to contribute to it, hey, cool. As long as you're not please do not violate any copyrights or anything like that if you send me art. But anything like original that you yourself drew or did, I would love it, and we'll be more than happy to throw it in there as we move toward a more final version 1.0 product.
Or if you have a Mordheim board, you have a setup or a scene, any of those types of things, terrain setup with a warband, a battle going on, those things could potentially find their way into the book as well.
Yep. So look for that. I will do a short video this week when we actually put it out. I'll also announce it on Twitter. So if you're not already following me at Warhammer Weekly, you can go ahead and follow me on Twitter. But it'll be in the Warhammer YouTubers, of course. So if you're not a member of the Warhammer YouTubers, what are you doing? Join that Google Plus community. It's great. So it'll be there. It'll be on Twitter. It'll be on my channel. So as long as you're following any of those things, you should be able to easily find the link and begin reading and playing and having fun murdering your friends in the City of the Damned. And that's really, isn't that the ultimate goal? To just absolutely brutally murder all of your closest friends in a horrible, ruined, burnout, abandoned city of madness. I mean, I know that's what I love. Hopefully you will too. All right, Tom, any final thoughts before we close her out there?
I'm excited for this project. I'm excited that I think that people may discover Mordheim for the first time. For those of you guys that are coming in that have not played Mordheim, I hope that that this is something that brings new life. For those that have written off Age of Sigmar, I hope that this causes people to come back and take a second look. To see if this is something that's viable for you and your group. So if the Age of Sigmar as a default isn't, maybe something like this is. So we invite everyone to come in and to partake and to give feedback. Yep,
that sounds great. All right, well, I think with that we've pretty much summed up all the basics. You can, of course, feel free, if you're not watching us live, or even if you are, you can, of course, feel free to put some more comments down below, and I will, as usual, we'll answer all of those comments. If you haven't already subscribed, you could subscribe for any sort of updates on that. But at any rate, regardless of all of that, we hope that you're excited and that you're going to enjoy it. We certainly love it and want to see as much community involvement come back, because that's what makes it really great and worth it and fun, is doing all this together. So there you go. That's my final thoughts. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for asking great questions. And as always, we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.